Canopy member number one.
Yes.
Everyone, I definitely encourage you to talk to Dave after the event and see his tattoo of the Canopy logo. It's very on brand.
Organic design.
He even got his rabbi's permission to get the tattoo. And we found out that he got the permission because his rabbi said, we'll have to chop off your finger before we bury you, but it's allowed.
Work it. I don't need it.
Right. Can't wait to see it.
So it's a pleasure to be here speaking tonight with Tyler Pugh and Katie Story. Tyler has a design firm that also has a fabrication studio and a construction company that's associated with it. He's done numerous different designs, everything from, what's the name of the park in Mission Bay?
Spark Social.
Spark Social, as well as for office spaces, residential spaces, parklands, so on and so forth. Katie Story has an interior design firm as well, called Story Design, and also has started the Good Future Design Alliance. So, Katie, if you can just give me a little introduction of how the concept of Good Future Design Alliance started, as well as what is it that you guys do and what you wish to accomplish.
How long did I talk? No. I'm Katie Story. I'm an interior designer in town, principal and the founder and principal designer of Story Design, and then co-creator of the Good Future Design Alliance, which is an industry-led movement of businesses and professionals who are committing to reduce our waste by 50% by 2025. We've created a membership platform where anyone from a sole proprietor to a 50-person business can join the platform and get a toolkit of resources to help you get to this 50% goal. And by 50%, I can go into more of this maybe in the questioning, but essentially we are a membership platform and we are building an alliance of really like industry leaders. We have 16 founding members who are already really helping us move the needle in reducing our waste in the industry. Probably get to more of that later.
Wonderful. Tyler, you want to give a little background and color on your history and what you guys do?
Yeah, so Element OP Design is an integrated design build firm. We really looked at verticalization, if you want to use that word, of the whole industry, starting with concept and going all the way through execution. So we hold both concept, schematic design, design development, all the way through construction documents, and then we go build it for a licensed intermediate contractor as well.
So why the middle of the alphabet, not the beginning or the end?
So the actual real story with that is I was 14 years old. I knew that I would own a company someday in my life, and I love those letters in the alphabet. They're fun to say, they make a word, they're just fun, and so I knew that it was going to be called Element OP Design. No kidding, that was actually what it was going to be. It was Element OP, and then it became Element OP Design, I should say.
So Katie, if you can go into a little bit of detail of techniques that are utilized for designers and architects and builders to reduce their waste by 50%. Like what sort of techniques they're utilizing to do that in the planning process as well as in the construction process.
Yeah, sure. So the Good Future Design Alliance, I'll give a little backstory, not too long, but it kind of came about because I've been in the industry for about 6 years, and I have a small firm, but we do about a couple dozen projects a year, 10 to 20,000 square foot homes and offices. So that's like a lot of square foot. I think you said this space is about 13,000, just for perspective, right? So that's a lot of square feet to fill with furniture and stuff, which is kind of awesome and a total dream. But this came about a year and a half ago when I was downtown at a big install, and there were like 8-foot high piles of like packaging peanuts and styrofoam and cardboard boxes, and I was sitting there and I was like, I'm responsible for this. I mean, yes, the client hired me, but I didn't do anything to stop this. So I kind of created this mound of waste, and it was immediately then that we were installing on a weekend. I went home, was exhausted from the install and had like kind of a switch in mentality. So then we started thinking of what can we do better, and I immediately implemented in my firm channels where you can like redistribute furniture. Started looking at where we're sourcing from and where we were giving stuff away, because most of the furniture on these projects is not like super damaged. It's just kind of faded out of style and clients don't want it anymore. So we really started focusing on how you could redistribute the furniture and such. And so fast forward, we are now, we have in our membership platform, we have a toolkit that includes sustainable vendors, like where you can find companies and retailers that are really leading the way on this path of using sustainable materials, thinking about their packaging waste, not wrapping every little planter, for example, concrete planter in plastic. And then we're also looking at like redistribution channels, like instead of just like the 1-800-GOODWILL, which is awesome, but they seem to be very full these days. We're developing relationships with nonprofits here and like Boys and Girls Clubs and hospice centers. So in the part of the toolkit that you get by being a member, you get like a 415 number or a 510 number where you can really like call and say, I have a sofa or I have a stove, what can I do with it?
Fantastic. Follow-up question with that is, how do you guys think about like timelessness in terms of sustainability and things that will last a long time and will be heirlooms, they'll be given away from generation to generation, or they'll become collectible items where you can resell it at auction, or even the Real now, which started off as a women's fashion secondhand designer e-commerce platform. Now they're selling furniture as well. So do you have like this timelessness like quotient within Good Future Design Alliance?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have that in my design style anyway, like for my firm, like the ethos kind of is like this timelessness rather than just following trend, even though bits of trend are fun. But yeah, I mean, like vintage, salvage, antique is really crucial to not only lessening our footprint, but it just like makes for a more interesting design. You can buy some new stuff, but what we're really saying through the Alliance to get to this 50% reduction is don't buy 100% new, buy like 50% new and look at salvage and vintage and all of these other sources that we've given you. And then on the out path, think about where you're sending stuff. Don't just send it to the landfill. So we love timeless and vintage and salvage, and we have a lot of good resources for that.
And Tyler?
I think timelessness is a great question. I think that's an aspirational goal all the time. Is we start with beauty, right? If we make things beautiful, inherently we start to build meaning behind them and memory and moment. Next thing behind that is we have to make them durable and lasting. And so if we're creating something new, how can we do that? Not just in the product, but in the spaces we're actually creating that actually last beyond a restaurant that goes out in 2 years because it was just trendy, right? How do we talk with our clients about how do you look at your business that go in much longer in time in regards to that? And then also very similarly, we look to shop what exists now already. I'd say we even take it to the level of what existed prior in how can something transform from one space and be timeless in another space, so to speak. Example is that we got started building parklets, and as soon as they ran out on one site, we'd basically take them off of the site, we'd clean them up, and then I'd sell them to a school or a nonprofit organization and refurbish them for it. And so looking at resourcefulness as one of our core values is like, how do we look at materials as everything is of value? And how do we ensure that that value is sustained over long periods of time in people's eyes and their memories of their experiences?
That's fantastic that you guys are thinking like in this sort of depth with what you guys are designing and creating. So how would you differentiate like the planning process versus the construction process in terms of sustainability? What are you guys using technology to be able to be more efficient and making sure that like if you're building a pre-built structure like this the stock height of the wood, and you're not cutting much, and there's not a lot of waste associated with it. Do you guys like have like set catalogs or notions in mind about the various different lengths that the building materials come in, so that there's less offcuts and waste associated? And is there technology that you can utilize to lessen the waste?
Yeah, I mean, that is a spot on question, and it's something that, at least, so when we were kind of figuring out the structure and the best way to bring the Good Future Design Alliance together, we gathered these 16 founding members, and those include like Jonathan Feldman Architecture, Bonnie Bridges, Jeremiah Design, some like real people who have experience in these issues. Because I'm an interior designer, so I know fabrics, I know furniture pretty well, but to your point, like the offcuts on like beams, like how do we account for less waste? So by bringing in all of these founding members, like Jonathan Feldman, who was outstanding, we really got advice from him on like, what should we be considering here? And so again, like as part of the membership and the toolkit, you get these questionnaires on like how to be more sustainable throughout every part of the process. So are you thinking about those off-cuttings? Are you designing for 8-foot or 12-foot? Are you considering like overages in tile? Like, do you really need the full 20%, or can you use like 10? Can you use that extra 10% like in the bathroom or something? If you're required to buy the extra 20%. So that's a great question, and I think it's certainly something to consider. And I think by creating this alliance of like industry leaders and design leaders, like we're really having those conversations. And to your point about technology, like, I don't know, I think we're maybe a little old school with like conversations. Which is not to say I'm opposed to a technology platform helping us, but the way we've developed this is like to really encourage conversation between the architect and the general contractor and the interior designer upfront with the client, so we can be like, hey, how do you want to do this in a more sustainable way? These are going to be the costs. Are you prepared for that? If not, are you prepared for 50% of the cost or whatever? But so we're really looking at it more as like an exchange of information and a conversation rather than an app. But if somebody has an idea, we'll be open.
I would agree. I think the reason why Element OP was founded was really to bridge the gap between the ideas of something and the execution of it, especially in the architecture and the construction world. Those relationships between those two parties are often combative and unproductive in a lot of ways. That's why construction is always 2x what you expect it's going to be, and why design never gets executed. Those kind of narratives exist is because you don't have the people in the room having a conversation first of how can we best utilize resources towards the benefit of the project, including time, including energy, including money, because all of those things go into a project to come into existence, and each of those has a carbon footprint attached to it. And so Element OP was founded on that principle that you bring intelligent people into the room at the beginning of the project, and then you have hard conversations together. You challenge each other on how you're thinking about things, like what's the hierarchy of needs here? What's the most important thing here? And then look back at the client and be like, hey, you said this was most important. If you say that, we're going to stay on that track. And so through the process of deep collaboration in the truest sense of the word, using different expertise, we found that we've gained efficiency. Our designers have learned to think about materiality differently, to think about the process and the manufacturing of it, and how they can use offcuts, and like what is the waste associated with it differently. And we produce better results, I'd say, because of that. We're unique in that way. From a technology standpoint, I think technology always has a space in the conversation. Specifically, we're using VR right now a lot in our conversations to bring our clients on board. New technologies as a means to get to a consensus on very abstract conversations oftentimes of what space is and how big it is and all of those things. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. One thing I learned recently from someone is that you can have only 2 of these 3 things, and and that's between quality, price, and timing when it comes to construction. I think the sustainability should be, the fourth element in the discussion, where hopefully you can have three of the four things within sustainability, high quality craftsmanship, low price, and then built on time. Yeah, I found that as quite a fascinating anecdote. So, in terms of the user experience when it comes to the design and the sustainability associated with it, what do you guys think about in the design process when you're designing around like the human use and the various different types of use that will be incorporated? So, for example, like a residential space, you'll think about like an evolving family where kids are maybe there may be no kids, and then there will be kids, and then kids will grow up and they will want different use of spaces, and the parents' interactions with them will change. Or in a public setting like a parklet or an urban food court, how do you guys think about that in relation to sustainable design and just like design thinking as a whole?
Do you want to go first to mix up the order?
Sure. I think without user experience at the forefront, you're dead in the water. Like, there is no sustainability of the product if the user isn't at the forefront of it. And I'd say user experience ranges from everyone that's building it to the company that's occupying and running it to the person that's actually experiencing it. So it has to be at the forefront of it. Because if that's meaningful, impactful, and good, then it's going to last longer. So that's vital.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. And I think like in my design practice, most of my clients I've had for years, and I think that's fairly common for designers too. You kind of go through life stages with a family. Like they start out with they just moved to San Francisco, got awesome jobs, got a new place, then they got a dog, then they have a kid, and now they have more responsibilities, now they have in-laws that are aging. So like, that's pretty fun to see what we can incorporate throughout projects of like, oh, we can now incorporate this bench into the baby's room, and that's where you sit and play or nurse or whatever, but like carrying over pieces rather than redesigning the whole place. To your question about how to evolve with a client. And I mean, I think so much of design too is tangible and physical, and we want to be like really kind of finding the pieces that work best for each scenario, but that are going to stand the test of time. Like I'm looking around here, and there's so many elements to point out, but you guys have done an awesome job here. But like, this sofa here, it can be, and probably is, like pulled over there, and it will grow. Maybe it'll be taken upstairs to the space. So it's like really about getting in early, those conversations with clients, thinking about how their lives might change or their situations might expand. And then you set yourself up for more success, rather than in 6 months being like, oh, we didn't factor that in, now we have to buy everything new again. And that defeats the point.
Right. So do you think this pink kitchen will last if we give up the space in 10 years? Do you think they'll tear it up?
No, they better not. And the pink bathroom tiles, were those original or
Yeah, we got really lucky. The pink tiles and the green tiles, the one-by-ones were pre-existing. And yeah, it's like we think about urban fabric a lot and like how to relate a new space to existing urban fabric and what has predated our lifespan here in the space prior to building it. And the two buildings that stick out substantially within this neighborhood, which are the zeitgeist of the time, are Francis Ford Coppola's Sentinel building across the road, which is this Flatiron building that has this patented copper that's become green. So we use copper as the metal here, and then the green tone comes from that building that if this curtain wasn't drawn, you'd be able to see it right now. And then the pink peaches tones come from City Lights bookstore, which is a block away, and that's where the beat poets, it's like the mecca of beat poetry. And we're lucky to move into the space, and the bathrooms already had pink and green tile, and I was like, we're keeping those, like cover them immediately, let's not get them dirty. And all we did is change the sink vanity, and that's it, and put new mirrors in. So it worked out well. And what's funny is the landlord actually remodeled every bathroom on all the other floors of the building and took out that pink and green tile and put this gray neutral ceramic that's pretty boring. Anyways, I don't want to diss on the landlord too much, but it's easy to do. Upcycling versus recycling. What do you think is more sustainable? And what would you aim for? Upcycle for the entry point into a new project, or recycle on the way out?
Well, we encourage all of it, actually. But I mean, that's a great question. And I think it's cool to think about upcycling, because you're using stuff that has already existed and giving it another life in maybe a somewhat related form. So that's pretty fun to think about. But I think if you're really thinking about how to, in our mindset, at least with the GFDA, we're thinking about how to reduce waste 50%. So we're looking at the inflow and the outflow, and so I'm going to kind of cheat and say that they're both important. I think upcycling is more interesting because of what you could do, but they're both super important to achieve this goal.
Can I piggyback on that?
Sure.
Both are important. I think upcycling adds I believe constraints breed creativity, up to a point. And I think upcycling gives some really good constraints and a good starting ground, or starting point for the team to start to assess what's important about this project. A lot of ours will start with one of those, and then it will come out, and then it'll come back in, and then it'll come out, and then it'll come back in, and hopefully it lands in.
You guys want to give an example of what you've done to upcycle something that you've incorporated in the project? It involves a great deal of creativity and collaboration. I think that's something that many designers really cherish. And it's collaborations with people and materials that are coming from a place to tell a story about how a material is has been reused, and where it comes from, and where it's gone, and the people that have been associated with it.
Sounds like you have an idea.
It just popped in. I was like, oh god, I don't know. My creative director is our mural. That's a great one. That's a great point. Yeah, the exterior of our building, we after about 3 years of being in the building of this CMU block, very gray draft building in which I was like, don't tell anyone we're in here kind of thing. Our creative director came in and said, we need to tell everyone what we're doing. I'm greatly appreciative of that. We used all, the majority, I would say, not all, the vast majority of paint left over from previous projects to do our mural on the outside of it. And it came out fantastically well. You should come by our space and see it. And I'd say another project is we upcycled a double-decker bus that was originally a Leland double-decker bus from London. That was the only one in the United States. We transported it from there and created it as a central point of one of our projects at Spark Social down in Mission Bay.
The building looks great, by the way. It's in my neighborhood, so it was a nice addition. So I don't do projects quite like that. Like I can't say I brought in a double-decker bus, but we do. Yeah, I I mean, I think over the years what we've done is we've certainly like incorporated mixed tiles, like tiles left over from a lot of projects, because oftentimes clients don't want like the 10% overage left in their basement. They might want 1% overage, right? And so then we take it, generally I keep it at my house or my storage unit. My husband doesn't like that, but generally I keep it, and then when the project comes along, we like mix it all together into a mural. Like we're doing this school downtown, this campus, and it's perfect for them. We have all these shades of blue that we're gonna be using that happen to be in my basement left over from projects. So like, that's an example. I don't have anything huge like the double-decker bus, but we try and really incorporate leftovers from projects. I also love to go to building resources, like even for my own house, we got this like super weird, like we needed like this 20-inch door to our backyard, which is really pretty narrow for a door, but we went to building resources and just there it was. And so now we have this like odd little 20-inch door with the dog door in it, but it fits perfectly. We wouldn't have been able to find it otherwise. Or we would have had to like have our guy, our friend Antonio, like cut it. So that worked out pretty well.
Amazing. So I'm going to ask one more question, then we can open it up to questions from the audience. And this is like a big question that I don't know if there's really an answer for. So, and if there is, like let's start a company. But what can be done to scale sustainability in the design industry globally and make like a real impact? Okay, the audience.
Well, yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I think that you can really start to think about your footprint size, which is essentially what we've done with the GFDA, and we're asking people to join us and reduce their footprints, their waste consumption by 50%. But really like the greater meaning to that, so yes, that's a number, and there's a toolkit, and there's a membership platform. We hope you join, but the greater thing actually is like the mind shift that's gonna come with that, that we kind of hope will start to transform like the design industry, and the way we approach projects, and the way we as like leaders of the built environment, like what a privilege. I don't know how many people are designers or architects in here, probably a lot, but what a privilege.
Let's have a raise of hands.
Yeah.
How many are designers in here?
Okay.
How many are architects? Anna, you can raise your hand. Builders. Pardon me?
Aren't architects designers anyways?
I'd say interior designer versus like architectural designer. Builders. Okay.
Landscapers. Manufacturers. Okay, well the point is like we have such a privilege of being able to design space, whether it's like this awesome space or somebody's home or Spark, or La Cocina, you know, we as designers, we have this like privilege of creating spaces. And so I think what we're really, how we're really thinking about it is like, start to shift your mentality, sign on to this concrete goal, because we all like concrete goals, right? But bigger than that is like this movement to change the mentality. And so then you start thinking about projects differently, you start thinking about your life differently. Like we hardly throw out any garbage now because I've like been like, James, think about this, you know? And like, so now we're like pretty low waste in our house. And I think that that can really have like a huge ripple effect. If like a community like this, or 100 people in the GFDA, or all the designers in San Francisco join and start thinking this way, think about like the impact that that could have on our clients' mentalities and their kids' mentalities, and then they travel the world. And so I really believe in that power.
It's amazing what you've started, and I only found out about it from this panel discussion. And big thank you to Temi from Pembroke PR for organizing the panel. It's a pleasure to meet both of you, and I would love to join GFD.
Yes!
So with that, let's open up some questions to the audience. Bacchus, I'm afraid.
Hi, I'll apologize in advance for the lengthiness of this question, but there is a good question coming for Katie and Tyler. So I'm none of the above. I'm a designer, builder, architect. I'm a lawyer, an artist, a writer, and a member here. And
Number one.
number one. And I feel as comfortable here. In fact, in some ways, I feel more comfortable here than I do in my own apartment. I love how homey this feels. And there's very little, maybe one thing I would do differently if I were given the chance. But when I'm here, I do think about design more than my apartment. Because I love the design, I love the versatility of the space, how it can flip from working to this, to it can be a dance space. And I love it when you guys took the discussion from the abstract or the more abstract theoretical to the tactile or literally to the tile, you know, pink and green, which I love. So Katie and Tyler, let's say that Amir came to you and said, I would like to hire you guys, and what could I do either differently down here, or what could I do upstairs? I haven't seen the upstairs in a while, so I don't know. I only saw it in sort of rough, hard-hat form. Everyone knows probably that they're opening upstairs. What would you advise if Amir and Steven, I guess, came to you and said, what could we do differently here? What, in your mind, what are you thinking? What do you see? What do you, like, if that was what he was going to ask you, and let's say you even had some money to pay you, what would you do differently either here or what would you do upstairs?
I love constructive criticism. Give it to me.
It's pretty good here. I need a second.
I can think of at least one thing, so you can at least think of one thing.
Give me a lashing, Dave.
What's that?
Give me a lashing.
What was that?
Lashing.
What would be my one thing?
Yeah.
Oh, I think that we live in a world where video is a part of our lives, and the inability to show a film or have a screen, or like you couldn't have a Super Bowl party here now. It'd be pretty hard. I wish you could, because I would like to come here and watch the Super Bowl on Sunday with all of these people and go Niners. The ability to have a video or a viewing or just something that worked, so we could show Francis Ford Coppola film if we wanted to, and Francis could come over and feel comfortable here, make some spaghetti, I don't know.
And drink some Chianti. I would love to do nothing more, but actually, like one thing we did on purpose here is like remove technology as much as possible. Like much to my partner Steve's chagrin, he wanted to he and as well as some members wanted to put, you know, like an iPad on every conference room with the dates and times of people going in, and I wanted to remove all that technology so that you have to have a conversation with the community manager who will come, and then if somebody's like overusing a space, you make it a conversation rather than like point at a screen and say it's my turn and have more technology in your face. We got so much technology and screens, and like I'm like, my goal is to remove screens as much as possible from spaces other than like the screen that's on this table right now. But let's start a movie theater.
But I'm curious what they would do.
My response would be actually to ask questions first.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you define success of this space? What are the core business principles? What are the guiding principles of the company? I think my approach to design is listen and learn first, and then make some educated guesses off of that. So I'd say give me a couple months, and I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not cheating, but I actually was just thinking that, like, it's such a good question, and if you do ask me, if we're ever really in that scenario, I'd love to just know more, like, what's working here? I'm not a member here, so, like, I don't know what the members need or want, you know? There's, like, so much to the design process that's not, like, it's not just about colors and light fixtures. It's like, what's going to function really well? You don't like technology, okay. That's fine. So how are people going to know whether the room is being used or not? Like really kind of getting into some of the stuff that people want. That's how you get design that like feels good without even noticing it. Like for you would have a big screen TV and you would be psyched maybe, but
Yeah, and like one thing for the non-designers in the room, and also the designers in the room to know is like all these details and stuff we contemplate and consider, and like look at like thousands of options with no right answer. 99.9% of people don't realize that. They may feel it, like, but they don't see like, okay, this, you know, like color matches with that color, or this shape matches with that shape, and so on and so forth. But they may feel like, okay, like the height of this canopy structure comes out to the bottom of this bulkhead right here, and they may feel like, okay, if it's like 6 inches off or a few inches off, they may feel it, but they won't notice it. And I think that's, as a designer, like I think more about feeling more than I do about like actual like quantification. It's more like a sensual experience and less of like a quantitative experience. Any other questions? Go for it, Joseph.
Katie, I missed maybe the first couple minutes of you explaining the network of designers, and it sounded like you're saying there's a way to repurpose pieces that are no longer in use, or like source pieces that have been used. How is that done? Do you guys have like, is there a website, or did I get that wrong?
No. You mean with the Good Future Design Alliance?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So there is a website. It's thegfda.com. All of the information you could want is there. We have our mission. We have our founding members. We have information on membership. The prices for membership. It's a tiered system based on annual profits, pretty reasonable amounts. But you get. And then it also explains what's in the toolkit. So yeah, for anyone who does want more information, if anyone wants to join, awesome. You can do so tonight, you can do so on the phone, whatever. Or if you just want more information, it's all on thegfda.com, or you can follow us on Instagram. We send a few emails, mostly about events and stuff now, but most of our communication is on Instagram and email. If you have questions.
Well, I think that Amir's right. There's a business idea there too. Maybe even to open it up to the public, like in one section of that, just so that there's maybe like a centralized resource to find things that otherwise would go to waste. I really like that.
You mean like non-industry? Just
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I just realized that I recently realized I'm a democratic socialist, so I'm really hungry for like a centralized
Go Bernie.
information. I think we're ready for that. That would be a lot.
Okay.
I'm sure
Noted.
there's web designers.
Lee, we got that?
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea, because I mean, what you're providing in terms of information and knowledge, a lot of homeowners and people who are DIY want to be able to access that, and maybe they'll want to join as well. And it doesn't need to be limited to just architects and designers and insiders, but like knowledge that I think many people who build or create or do or buy anything should know.
Or like
I love that feedback.
the
Yeah.
equivalent of like a builder's resource.
Yeah.
Online.
Very
We
smart.
will get to that. That's a great idea. Thank you for that.
Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm just curious on what are some barriers, challenges that you're facing right now?
In general.
What are some
What are some barriers or challenges that we're facing right now?
I would say the biggest barrier or challenge that we face is around human habit or psychology more than anything. Even an amazing design team, we have the habit of looking out at something new or something online first, rather than like getting up and walking to the back of the shop to find out if we have the 2x4 that we need, rather than ordering it, kind of thing. So I'd say the biggest challenge that I really see is like getting habits built around looking up first, look around, assess what you have, and how could you reuse those resources for your needs. I'd say that's one, and then the second is start with the end in mind. Like, what does the end result look like when it comes to resource allocation or diverting things from the waste stream? Because if you do that, you start engaging everyone along this very complex system, and then start engaging them. What does the end look like? And so I really like, if the goal is to reduce waste, we have to start with that question first.
I mean, I think with starting something like the Good Future Design Alliance and like asking people to pretty fundamentally change the way they're approaching projects, like there are a lot of issues that come up, right? It's a bold move. We think it's completely attainable and achievable. We've been working with Recology Waste Management as our advisor, in addition to these 16 founding member firms, to really come up with a platform that we think is feasible and attainable, or goals that are attainable and stuff. But I don't know. I mean, we still come up with, people are worried about going out of business, you know, if they're too sustainable and if they don't have their markups on brand new things, you know. And so I think we've done a lot of listening over the last year with our founding members and people as we've been developing this, and we continue to listen, but that's some of the pushback we're getting, you know, is like we need to let people know that they're not going to go out of business. None of us want to do that. We're all here to be in business, to be designers, to be creative, and I think that's actually pretty fun. In a creative industry, like, get even more creative with like how you source and like minimize your waste, and then that's like a pretty killer project that you can talk about.
One thing I would add is, I mean, I would love to check off 4 of 4 boxes. I mean, 3 of 4 is a success, 2 of 4 you're doing good, 1 of 4 you fail. 4 of 4, the sustainability, timing, price, and what was the 4th? Quality of craftsmanship. Yeah, I mean that's like the ultimate. Those are the hurdles, and those are the goals. Is nailing down them 4.
Hi, my name is Marita, and I'm a digital product designer. So technology is my life. I have 2 questions. My first question is about the life cycle of what you're designing. How easy is it for you to know exactly the cost of it and where it came from? And so when I say cost, I'm talking about the person that, I don't know, maybe cut down the tree to get you a wooden table. Like, how far back and how much information do you have that you can pinpoint the full life cycle and cost of creating it? And then my other question is about replenishing. You're talking about reducing. How much responsibility do you think it is of the designer to replenish the product you're buying? Yeah, two questions.
Yeah, I'll answer number 1. I know nothing about where pretty much anything comes from. From the, like they say, from the soup to nuts. I prefer soup to creme brulee. I mean, it's such a weird phrase. Like, it's people used to have nuts for dessert, but like I like creme brulee and ice cream, and they have soup for the appetizer. But that's a digression. So, you know, I admire this brand that Kelly Slater started called Outer Known, and Outer Known like sources like literally like every polyester strand, every cotton, every piece of alpaca, every, you know, wool, and what farm it comes from, how it's produced, its impact, and how it's created. And I mean, none of us are, you know, furniture designers or production. We don't work for Herman Miller, or we don't work for lumber yards. It's a tough question to answer, but I bet Herman Miller probably knows like this fabric from Muharrem and this plywood, where it comes from, and the impact that it has associated with it. And I mean, Herman Miller is quite like socially conscious, environmentally conscious, but a lot of small companies and even larger companies, again, it comes down to those four things like quality, craftsmanship, time, and sustainability and pricing. It's like you can only think about so much, right? And what are you gonna put as like your focus of your business and your company, and as your values and principles that you're gonna think about and promote. And what I'm highly bullish on is now I think sustainability is going to be, that story is as important, if not more important, than like the craftsmanship story. The new generation and even older generations really care about the effect it has on climate and the world, what we're buying and our effect upon the global ecosystem.
I mean, I would agree, I would agree that it's really hard to track like the tree that was felled for a piece of furniture. I guess one company that comes to mind who's part of the GFDA is Fear and Furniture. They're here local on Harrison Street is their factory. They make awesome chairs and stools, and they come to mind because I was talking with Dave, and they know their supplier is within 100 miles from here, and they know where the wood comes from. They feel really strongly about that. That's like in their ethos. So I don't know. That's an example of like a fairly small local company opposite of Herman Miller. But I mean, I think so. You can start with local companies and really like question them and pressure them to like find out this information. And then, but with the larger companies, I don't know. It's hard. I don't know the answer. Maybe Tyler looks like you might.
I don't know if I know the answer. I can tell you I do have a unique experience where I grew up in a logging family in Northern California and understand a lot about the supply chain within timber specifically. Spark Social, how many people have been to Spark Social? Excellent. Come back. If you haven't been there, it's awesome. It's so much fun. With the ethos and the design intent around kids and dogs, one of our prompts was really, how do we not create a chain link fence? That was a driver from the community. And so we looked at sourcing lumber all over the place, and it was just priced out everywhere. And so looked to my community where I grew up in and basically sourced all of the lumber. There is a cedar that was burnt down, timber that was gonna be basically destroyed. It wasn't good enough to go to the mill, and so it was just gonna deteriorate. And so instead, family sawed it, milled it, shipped it over here. The logs out front, I'm connected to my dad who built them, so that's kind of a unique story, but it frames our approach in like using and leaning on different experts in their field, and you can find the ones that are passionate about this, like that want, like they care about where that the lumber came from, and that shows in their product. Challenges is often prices higher. That's the thing right now. But then you have to sell it to the client that it's going to last longer and it's going to be more meaningful because of this story. What's exciting is that narrative, that story is starting to build momentum in which it brings up the value, or in the perceived and actual value of the resultant design. And then all of a sudden, we get to design amazing things that have incredible stories and incredible sustainability around them in a space where everyone values it. And then your first question was around lifespan, and like,
Yeah.
Sometimes we know a lot. We do some things in the event space, which is alarmingly wasteful, and it's staggeringly, it makes my stomach turn. And so I'm trying to figure out how we can look at the event space differently in that regard. But oftentimes we don't know. There's a design intent to last a certain amount of years. With a restaurant, it's like 5 to 10 years. We know that these elements are going to get replaced. But oftentimes it's the story and how well it's designed, as well as with your partner, how good the food is, how well is the experience, that these things all come together. And the hope is that that all comes together. On the other end, if it doesn't work out, I also want to be there for the client to have an avenue to make sure that that doesn't go to the waste, to recology, which more often than not it does, which is insane, the amount of waste that's produced.
Yeah, marketing, I think plays a huge role in sustainability. And like, look, expensive things people will recycle and pay more for and will care for. And you know, the Prouvé, Perignon, you know, Story, you know, the Chandrigal furniture that's used in schools and courthouses and now worth tens of thousands of dollars for a chair. And these are like, I don't know how many people are familiar with, you know, these French modernist designers, but they built utility. This was like IKEA furniture of the time that was just well crafted. And nowadays, like, people cherish it, and it's in like every AD article, photo shoot of a Genere chair on like a kitchen counter or a dining table, and they were originally designed for schools. And so I think like this, and marketing comes to telling stories. What stories are people interested in, and how are these stories going to create value for utility? And like the goals, I think, should be within sustainability. And when it comes to furniture design, is like mass products that are highly desirable and so desirable that they'll gain in value and not like subside in value. Any other questions?
Sorry, there was actually a second part to this question that I
Oh.
was really curious about regarding like how much accountability the designers should take in determining where the sources come from.
Say that again. How much accountability and
So the first question was regarding how much do designers know where these sources come from the end-to-end cycle. The second part was how much responsibility do designers have in knowing where these sources are coming from and seeking that knowledge.
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, the designer has responsibility, the manufacturer has responsibility, and the end user has responsibility. Who has more responsibility? I give it to the manufacturer, without a doubt. They're the ones who are producing stuff that people are using, and they should be thinking about this as like, you know, core principles of what it represents. You get-
I would agree.
I mean, the designers tell the story for the manufacturer, and the only information they know is from the manufacturer, and it's, look, we're not Kelly Slater. We can't afford to like travel to the farm in Peru and see like where the llama is living and take photos of them and tell it part of the story, or the wool on the chair that we're using. That's not practical. So we need to utilize the manufacturer's resources.
So then kind of bouncing off of that, do you think that manufacturers should be more, provide more information on where things are resourced and how they manufacture their goods? Like, should there be some sort of laws or anything that should happen so that it's easier for designers to know where things are resourced?
I mean, I don't know about laws, maybe, but I think in general, more information is really helpful, you know, because when we are with a client who has X budget and XYZ demands, like, we are going to be sourcing to try and meet their goals and to meet our sustainability goals personally, and but we can only do as much as we know. I mean, not to kind of like back out of the responsibility, because we certainly have some as designers, but like, if we don't have the information, how can we know anymore? So yeah, I think it's really like, give us all the information, where stuff is from, be really transparent. I mean, that would be super cool.
Yeah, as designers, it's hard enough to get a price from a
Yeah.
manufacturer, let alone the timing of when it's going to arrive. and then like to talk about like where does the wood come from on top of that. I mean, forget about it. Like, you got to prioritize. And again, it comes down to like adding sustainability into a latent need that I think people should tell as part of their story of manufacturing anything.
Well, and I think the manufacturer holds a lot of responsibility. I think the power is actually in the consumer. It's in the consumer in initial knowledge to demand magazines like Interior Design or Architectural Digest to not view sustainability as a niche market, which is really nice to add into a subsidiary little article every once a month kind of thing, but actually to make that a primary premise in which design is founded off of and then built off of. And if that happens, then all of a sudden you have marketing push that demands the industries to shift in that direction. From my perspective, most manufacturers are really resistant to any change until their bottom line starts to get hit real quick. And I think the consumer has the power to do that.
And that's where fashion is moving towards already.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, one thing I've read recently is like the younger generation, their consumer habits has said that they will pay more for things that are sustainable and don't affect the climate. And I salute all the under 30s in the room that are behind this movement, because this is something that I think all future generations, as well as like convince your parents and grandparents to get behind this, since it affects you.
So I think I might disagree just a little bit. I think designers actually need to take a more active role in informing their clients about the journey that a single piece of furniture takes. I think they don't understand that a sofa has furniture that's fabricated in Italy, takes a trip to China, and that the sofa is then coming across the world to the United States. And that's not something that's inherent to them, of course, but I also think that by us pressing on manufacturers for more information and more transparency, it's going to kind of guide them into the direction of more sustainable practices and more responsible sourcing. There's a lot of people who are doing amazing things locally, and it's a matter of a 2-hour car drive. So I guess I'm a little bit interested into what you think the design industry's contributions are to climate change on a larger scale, not just with how fabrics are treated, the journey that all of these things are taking, sourcing, timber. I mean, I think there's a lot of practices that are so inherent to the industry that we don't want to change them, but I think we kind of have to start changing the tide in the direction of no, I do want to know where the timber's coming from. What is the journey it's taking to get to the fabricator? And I think the more we start asking questions, the more they're going to be inclined to be more conscious about that versus, because the guys that are really paying the price are the ones doing the labor for inhumane amounts of money, because it's all about the bottom dollar. So in educating our clients on the importance of spending more money at the get-go and getting more out of it in the back end so that these pieces can be repurposed later on down the line. I think we're so, all of us are so, it's ingrained to get the lowest price possible that's someone is paying the price for that. It might not be our clients, but it's the guys in the fields and working in the mills and doing those things. So I guess what do you think we could be doing to make more of an impact in climate change in the bigger picture as designers? Because we're the mailman, so we have huge responsibility in what's happening.
Yeah, I think from my perspective on that, yes, totally. I think there is responsibility there. We're in a seat of power in which we should utilize. We're in a position of responsibility in which we need to step into. I think the biggest thing that you could do to actually move that dial in any way is actually work with students. Here's why, is most designers come out of school not knowing their value and not knowing how to advocate for that value. You give them those skills along with a mission, watch out. Then they'll go to the client and be able to, coming out of school, I had no idea how to advocate for the business myself, let alone sustainability as a measure to pay more money. That's what it is. And for me, to be honest, it's teaching business to designers. That's my whole mission. It's education. So.
It's a great one. Yeah. I'll just speak. I agree. You're right. I think if we had more information from manufacturers, then it's on us to deliver that information to the end client. So I totally agree with that. I'll just speak quickly to what our impact is, because Lee and I have looked into this a lot, and so it's pretty staggering. What we found was 500 million tons of construction and demo debris every year go into our landfills in the U.S., and 12.2 million tons of furniture alone. So So not even like siding and drywall and stuff. It's like strictly furniture goes into the landfills every year. Right, like we don't know this stuff until you go digging and try and start the GFDA, right? Like it's not stuff that designers want to know, but it's pretty astonishing. And if you think, I don't know, I just don't think anyone could hear those facts and be like, oh great, let's keep doing things the way we're doing them. Like why don't we take the steps to reduce 10% a year, maybe 20% a year, so that 50% over 5 years, we can get to this point of like, reducing our waste and shifting our mindset.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I also disagree with you. The part I agree with you on is like designers do need responsibility in what they do. What I disagree upon is you focus a lot on transportation and shipping and production for the carbon footprint of what creates the climate impact. And my ultimate thesis in every project I do is like make it as timeless and durable as possible, because if you use high quality materials, even if it came from halfway around the world, that tells an interesting story. People are hopefully not going to rip it out when they buy a place or re-rent a place, and it'll be there for 100 years. Like we've got granite, marble, and solid 1.5-inch ash tables. They're gonna get scratched. They're gonna get busted. We'll keep sanding them down, and it'll still look great, and it'll last 100 years. If that material may have came from Italy, it may have been transported halfway around the world, but it's gonna last. And if you look at the buildings that are the icons of the times, like they always use the highest quality, most durable materials, and they don't sacrifice integrity and design. So if you don't do that, then you don't create an impact by not changing, because the biggest impact is ripping something out, throwing it in the dump, and buying something new.
I was just wondering what percentage of waste you think is attributable to, less developed program design or clients changing their minds rather than smart design and sustainable sourcing?
A lot? I mean, I don't know, but that's a great point, right? Like, I think we've probably all been in projects where halfway through there's either like a major budget change or a couple kids coming in, or who knows, like a major change of scope. So I guess I don't know. I'm just acknowledging that's a great question. I don't actually know the answer.